Alright, so welcome back to another video, guys. Today I want to take a look at the AMD RX 7900 XTX in Doom the Dark Ages at 4K. We'll look at some native resolution, FSR quality, performance, FSR frame generation. We'll even take a look at some AFMF as well, just for fun, and see how it does. And since I've already done a video on the 9070 XT and RTX 4090, I decided to do just a little quick comparison between these three GPUs. This is at native 4K TAA Ultra Nightmare settings, and of course the game is pretty demanding, but it looks like the 9070 XT is a little bit ahead over the 7900 XTX, running in a straight line anyway. So this is the very beginning of chapter 9. Now, I also want to take a look at the averages and 1% lows at the end of the first encounter. While in a straight line, the 9070 XT was around 10% faster than the XTX, by the end of this encounter, the 9070 XT was noticeably ahead, guys. 48 FPS average on the XTX versus 54 FPS on the 9070 XT, and 38 FPS 1% lows on the XTX versus 47 on the 9070 XT. But it's important to keep in mind that even though it is the same encounter and I killed the same amount of enemies, how the fight plays out wasn't necessarily exactly the same. On the XTX, I got pulled towards the boss more, so maybe that put more of a load on the XTX versus the 9070 XT. You know, it's very difficult. It's impossible to have an exact same run because fights will play out quite a bit different each time. But it's still interesting to see either way. What I wanted to start with, though, was, is the 7900 XTX able to play the game at native 4K Ultra Nightmare settings, right? And that's what I set out to do here. And yes and no. So this is the second chapter, the beginning of it. Here, we're actually able to stay at pretty close to around 60 FPS. And for this game, you want a little bit more than 60. But 60, I would say, is the bare minimum. At least with a controller. But yeah, the 7900 XTX does actually fairly well here. We aren't locked at 60. It does dip a little bit below, but having played the game more and more now, I figured out that starting from chapter 6, the game can become a little bit more graphically demanding. So if we switch over to chapter 8, which is where I'm currently at the beginning of chapter 8, the game does become noticeably more graphically demanding because we go from 60 to around 44 FPS. And this, yeah, you don't want to play a game like this at around 40 FPS, even if you were to use a controller, which I don't. I like to use a mouse and keyboard. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and try to toggle on some FSR, start with FSR Quality, actually, and then leave everything else on Ultra Nightmare and see what happens. Alright, so we go from 44 FPS to around 75 FPS, and this is most definitely much better. Ideally, I'd like to be at around 90 FPS, and I know some Doom players that want to be quite a bit higher than that, but unfortunately, Doom the Dark Ages is quite a bit more GPU demanding than Doom Eternal was. After all, id Tech has updated their engine with a lot of forward-looking features, ray tracing, the maps are bigger, the encounters are bigger as well, and the game looks noticeably better as a result. Although some people, I've heard comments say that they don't feel it's worth it. Of course, that is someone's opinion and they're entitled to it. Personally, I do think the changes made look very nice and I like it, but it does come at a cost. CPU wise, we're doing really good. 1% lows are really good here. 7800X3D does an excellent job. I actually did a video the other day, I'll link it below, where I tested a bunch of Ryzen CPUs from Ryzen 2000 all the way up to the Ryzen 9800X3D. And yeah, this game is extremely, extremely well optimized when it comes to the CPU front. It runs extremely smooth, so yeah, no problem at all. I mean, even at 1080p with DLSS performance on an RTX 4090, there was barely any difference between the 9800X3D and 7800X3D on my video. So that goes to show just how well optimized the game is in that front. But yeah, by the end of this engagement, we ended up averaging 72 FPS with 63 FPS for 1% lows. That is really good. And again, this is one of the more demanding areas in the game. While this level of FPS is alright, for all intents and purposes, for this game, I still think, personally, I would like to be close to 90. So what we're going to do is we're going to give FSR Performance a go. Previously, we ended up averaging 72 FPS with 63 FPS, 1% lows. Now we drop to FSR Performance. We do get a very nice bump in FPS, but that does unfortunately come at a bit of a visual image quality cost, which, you know what, we're going to take a look at the difference a little bit later in the video, in the conclusion, because FSR in general does have noticeably more flicker. I mean, I've been used to playing the game with DLSS, and DLSS works extremely good in this game, and FSR does have some noticeable flicker. Now, is it a huge deal? Not really. I mean, personally, I kind of got used to it and didn't think too much of it, but it did stand out. And the reason why I mentioned this is because we do need FSR 4 in the game. I hope AMD can become a little bit more aggressive with getting FSR 4. I tried looking into it if it can be done with OptiScaler, but the game is Vulkan, and apparently there's no SDK for FSR 4 yet, and Vulkan. OptiScaler results, I tried to look into it, wasn't very promising. I couldn't find anyone that's done it. Maybe it is doable, but I'm not sure personally how to do it. So if I do figure it out, I will make a video. But we do need official support. That is very important, and important to emphasize, because we have a 9070 XT. That is one of its selling points. And if down the road it does come to the RX 7000, like I've been hearing rumors about, that a variant of FSR 4 may make it to RDNA 3. I hope it does. That would be a very nice addition. But either way, performance-wise, this is fine. I am perfectly fine with playing the game this level of performance. It's kind of what I've been doing on the 4090 with DLSS on quality. I've been getting around 100 FPS or so, and it's been great. And this feels great. The game still looks really good. Feels nice to play. Very responsive at 4K with FSR Performance. But anyway, image quality cost aside, if I was using a 7900 XTX to play the game at 4K, which is how I would want to play it because I have a pretty nice 4K OLED display, I would use FSR Performance like this. This feels great. And we did end up averaging 108 FPS and 88 FPS for 1% lows. That was compared to 72 average with FSR Quality and 63 FPS for 1% lows. So that is a very, very nice jump in performance. It's what, around 35% or so? Now, the next most logical step from here would obviously be FSR Frame Generation, and we're gonna check that out next because I am using a 4K 240Hz OLED, so FSR Frame Generation would be great. And we just got a brand new weapon. What the heck is this thing? A grenade launcher or something? Oh yeah, that's what it looks like. Sick. Well, let's give FSR Frame Generation a try. And I'll mention a caveat. And here we go, guys. FSR Performance. We'll go ahead and turn on FSR Frame Generation on top. Previously, we were averaging 108 FPS, so we're getting around 110 FPS or so. And with FSR Frame Generation, we're getting around 185. Now, interestingly, the frame time graph looks very similar to what the new DLSS frame generation algorithm looks like. But I did experience crashing with MSI Afterburner and FSR Frame Generation on the 9070 XT, and the same thing happened here. But that's okay, no worries, because what we're going to do is disable MSI Afterburner and use AMD's own overlay. So it doesn't have a lot of the statistics that I like to present to you guys and be able to see, but it does have the most important, which is our frame rate and frame time. And there we go, we are in the 190s FPS, so doing really good here. Getting ever closer to my 240Hz display. This actually feels pretty good, guys. It does look extremely fluid on the display, and I feel FSR Frame Generation does a really good job here. I don't see anything that stands out really, I mean, other than being able to notice a bit of flicker and the image being overall a bit softer because we are using FSR Performance, but I mean, other than that, there's no garbling or anything like that. FSR Frame Generation has been a very, very cool technology that AMD launched. So I feel FSR Frame Generation, they got that right straight from the get-go. So they did a really good job. But I did have someone leave a comment on one of my previous videos suggesting I check out AFMF with FSR Frame Generation, since AMD GPUs don't have multi-frame generation. Well, neither do RTX 4000 GPUs, only RTX 5000s, and those, I heard they're having some crashing problems in Doom the Dark Ages. Kind of strange, considering it's an NVIDIA-sponsored title, but I figured, what the heck, why not, right? We can throw AFMF on top. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I've never been the biggest fan of AFMF. I do notice that it does degrade the image quality, but we'll give it a shot here. We'll enable AFMF in Doom the Dark Ages. And what I'm also going to do is go back to FSR Quality, because I do not want to go beyond that 240 Hz refresh rate, and then it's not going to look good because I'm going to get screen tearing. And here we go, guys. We're actually getting kind of close to my monitor's display refresh rate, 230 something FPS, and we have FSR Quality, which we were getting around 80 FPS, FSR Frame Generation, which took us to around 110 FPS, and now with AFMF, that more or less doubles our FPS, which makes sense. The frame rate that we're getting. Now, the game definitely doesn't feel as fluid as it might look. And even, I'll be honest with you, I think it actually looked a bit more fluid without AFMF. I just think like AFMF does add a bit of, it's kind of hard to explain, but it doesn't look as smooth as it does with just frame generation, because you got to think that we only have so many real frames, and then we're using frame generation, then on top of that we're also using AFMF, adding a lot more latency, and then we've got a lot of two different types of technologies, frame interpolation technologies, working together. And to me, that's never really appealed to me. I do notice that the image quality doesn't look as fluid as it did without AFMF. I think AFMF would make more sense if you're already getting like 120 FPS and you have a 240 Hz display like me, and there's no FSR frame generation, so you just turn on AFMF. And I've actually tried that in one game. I need to look more into it, and it was alright. It wasn't too bad. But like this, I think it's too much frame generation. And what do I mean by garbling anyway? Garbling is what happens when frames are misaligned, and this is most noticeable with like fine objects or complex geometry, like the door, for example. And this may not come through on the recording just because we're getting over 230 frames and we're capturing at 60, but just panning the camera left and right, looking at the door, it's almost like the frames are not aligned properly, and it causes this like flicker. But it doesn't happen all over the screen. It only happens with some assets, and for me personally, I find that to be a bit distracting. It's a lot like flicker to me. So I think it's just too much frame generation here. I'm not a fan of using AFMF and FSR frame generation. Personally, I prefer frame generation, and then AFMF if I'm getting over 100 FPS. And there's no FSR frame generation. That's just my personal taste. But yeah, that's the 7900 XTX at 4K. We looked at a lot of stuff here. Overall, I think it did pretty good. The game has become a lot more graphically demanding. I mean, that is true. Yes, it does look a lot better, and they've improved the engine. They've made things easier for themselves. The ray trace lighting looks very nice. The volumetric effects look really good. Destructible environments, bigger enemies, dismemberment, all that stuff. It's actually really cool. It is a pretty noticeable step up from Doom Eternal. But again, the game has become quite a bit more graphically demanding, although it is well optimized in the aspect that the game runs very smooth, right? We looked at a bunch of Ryzen CPUs on the previous video, which I'll link below, and the game ran even on an 8-year-old Ryzen 2600, which is below the minimum recommended spec, right? So that is very good. 7900 XTX if you're going to play at 4K. I think personally I would like to use FSR Performance, and that's what I'm playing with here, is FSR Performance and FSR Frame Generation, and that works fine. I mean, again, like I said, since I've been used to playing with DLSS looks noticeably a lot more stable than FSR does, so I'm hoping that FSR 4 can make it into the game at some point. It would be a very noticeable upgrade, but other than that, I do think you get used to it, and overall the game feels very nice to play. definitely enjoying it, having fun. I would totally play the game like this without any issues. But yeah, guys, that's a 7900 XTX. You leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Maybe you don't notice some of the things I do, and that's perfectly fine. To each their own. The point is to have fun and enjoy the game. And that's what I plan to do. Anyways, please give the video a like if you liked it, guys, and consider subscribing for more content. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.